This is the caglecast from cagle.com. We're all about political cartoons and cartoonists and about the news and issues of the day. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this and visit cagle.com to see all the cartoons in case you're just getting the audio podcast and you're not seeing the cartoons. We'll discuss the top 10 most reprinted editorial cartoons in America from the last week. I'm Daryl Cagle, and I'm here with Brian Farrington, our editor at Cagle Cartoons. And today we have two great award-winning cartoonists, Pat Bagley, who's drawn for decades for the Salt Lake Tribune in Utah. Hello, Pat.
Hi there.
And RJ Matson from Maine, who drew for years for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and Mad Magazine and the New Yorker and just about every place else. Nice to see you, RJ.
Hi, nice to see you.
So, gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're going to go through those top 10 cartoons. And I just want to say, these are the cartoons that editors chose to print. They may not be your favorite cartoons or our favorite cartoons. Editors have different criteria for cartoons of what cartoonists do. Cartoonists like hard-hitting, tough cartoons that are persuasive and change people's minds, and we like to do powerful things. Editors like cartoons that don't generate any letters to the editor and are about topics of the day without taking a strong point of view on either side. And I have mixed feelings about showing these top 10 cartoons each of these podcasts because we end up talking all the time about what editors like and how that frustrates us. And I guess that's on all of our minds.
Apparently, this is true of small town newspapers, that they don't really like the controversy. The cartoons are nothing but trouble. I think in bigger newspapers, they've got thicker skins and they tend to be a little more open-minded, I guess.
True. When I was hired at the Post-Dispatch, they told me they were looking for trouble and they wanted a crusading cartoonist. And that was the goal. You have the same situation in Salt Lake. You're on the editorial board. You take part in all the editorial board meetings with the editorial page editor and the writer, and you generally come to a consensus on most issues. And even though they might present your cartoon as the cartoonist's view as opposed to the editorial page view of the day, I tended to stay in line with what we agreed on. So if we had a big debate and decided to endorse one candidate over another, I would reflect that in my cartoon. Generally, we were all somewhat aligned anyway.
You have the number one cartoon of the week, which is this one. It's a Social Security card, and the Democrat donkey and the Republican elephant are pushing the pillars out from under the Social Security roof, and they're both saying, for starters, we're taking this off the table, benefit cuts and new taxes. I should say that I read all of these and describe the cartoons because we're also an audio podcast and most people can't see the cartoons. So, RJ, what do you think?
I like the image. I like the joke. This is drawn for Roll Call, which is a newspaper that has been around for about 70 years. It covered Congress and Capitol Hill as if it were a small town, as if it were like an industry journal of like Variety covers Hollywood. The editor, they're willing to do hard-hitting cartoons that make fun of specific politicians and take on each party. But I'm sort of always aware that day after day, week after week, they don't want it to seem like they're partisan and only picking on one side. So in any deadline day, I'll send them 4 or 5 sketches of different jokes on different topics. And I always try to sprinkle in cartoons that are sort of a pocket on Boaster House type of cartoons that make fun of both parties. So it never surprises me when they pick a cartoon like this. These cartoons may not always be the ones I'm most passionate about, but sometimes they can be very funny and pointed. And I see how this could be popular in the sense of being reprinted in the most newspapers around the country.
It's got all that familiarity to the Social Security card. I think it's cool. It's a beautiful cartoon. Pat, you have the number 2 cartoon this week. It's an Into the Woods cartoon with Little Red Riding Hood walking into these spooky woods, but they're the spooky woods with a wolf for Twitter and YouTube and TikTok and Pinterest and Facebook. Scary internet woods. You want to talk about this one? Lovely looking cartoon.
Sure. Apparently, suicide rates among teenagers are going up, especially with girls. And they're trying to figure out what is causing it. I think that one of the causes may be social media. We evolved over millions of years to be in groups. And all of a sudden we're thrown into this wholly different kind of group, and we're not really equipped to handle this. Anybody who goes on Twitter, Facebook, don't have to go very far to find people who violently disagree with you and wish really horrible things on you. And I've got a thick skin. I've been doing this for 45 years, so I know what to expect. But people who are young and are thrown into that cesspool, it can be pretty traumatic, I think. So that's what I'm trying to say in the cartoon, is that it is like going into the woods, and there are scary wolves out there.
And also, this is a cartoon that both left and right would agree with right now. So that makes sense that the editors would gravitate towards this.
Yeah.
Beautiful looking cartoon.
So thank you.
So the number 3 cartoon is by Jeff Katurba, who's a regular in the top 10 because he's a moderate and he doesn't do those hard left and right cartoons. This is a little boy at the kitchen table eating candy Easter eggs, and the header says, "As we head into the Easter season," little boy says, "Chocolate eggs for breakfast?" And mom says, "They were cheaper than the real thing." You know, these expensive eggs cartoons have just been sweeping the top 10 in the cartoonists. They're doing expensive eggs cartoons. I don't think you guys are.
I haven't done an egg cartoon yet. It's on my bucket list for the month.
Well, I noticed that eggs were getting really expensive a couple months ago, but in the meantime, they've solved the problem here anyway, and it's come back down.
Well, that's very
good.
reassuring.
Go
Okay,
up,
here's
but when they come down, you have a problem.
Okay. Dave Granlund is also very popular with editors, and he's got 2 in the top 10 this week. He's got a Jimmy Carter tribute cartoon. Jimmy Carter was taken into hospice, and things are looking bad for him with his cancer. And it's a pretty portrait cartoon, man of many hats. He's holding his construction hat from Habitat for Humanity. It says, "Farmer, U.S. Navy, Governor, President, Teacher, Carpenter, Jimmy Carter." You know, every so often that we see cartoons like this, typically they're obituary cartoons. This one's a little bit early. Actually, I have been getting submissions of Jimmy Carter obituary cartoons early from cartoonists. So we have to be careful not to post them. We've gotten in a lot of trouble for that in the past, particularly with Nelson Mandela, because he was reportedly near death for something like 3 or 4 months. And we probably got 30 Nelson Mandela obituary cartoons a couple of months before he died. And we got so many angry complaints. It's like the whole world was outraged at us.
Well, I have a question for both of you guys. It's pretty standard policy in the newspaper business to pre-write obituaries for popular people. That way, when they actually go, they've already got it ready. I think the New York Times does that, where they pretty much write everybody's obituary sometimes decades before they die. But did your editors at your papers ever ask you to do that? If somebody prominent was about to die, can you have this ready for us so we can run it immediately?
At least in my case, they haven't asked for that yet.
No, that's never happened. I could only imagine it happening if you're approaching a weekend deadline and they wanted to have something to slip into the Sunday paper on a Saturday.
Yeah.
You know, if I submitted my Sunday cartoon on Friday, but that never happened.
It makes me uncomfortable, and we have to watch out for it. It seems to me like you can wait until somebody actually dies. All right. This one is Dave Granlund's second cartoon in the top 10. It says freight trains, but he crosses out the E and it becomes freight trains. And this is a toxic chemical train shooting down the tracks about 2 feet above the tracks, ready for an explosion like Palestine, Ohio. You know, Palestine, Ohio's on everybody's mind, and this is what the editors were looking for.
Well, that's another example of a cartoon that doesn't really take a left or right perspective. It kind of hits both sides equally, and that's why editors gravitate towards that. It doesn't take an ideological point of view necessarily. So,
Right.
And it's also, you know, a topical cartoon that covers tragedies. If it bleeds, it leads. So they have to cover that. So it sort of
Interestingly, cartoons that just simply mention a topic that's in the news so that you're thinking about it graphically, those tend to perform better than the cartoons that actually present a point of view about that topic.
Right,
in the
right.
news. All right. This is Jeff Katurba's second cartoon in the top 10, Anniversary Cake. And it has Vladimir Zelensky standing on a big cake, which is the map of Ukraine, in a tiny little Vladimir Putin eating a little bit of the cake. He's very tiny. This is a standard trope for editorial cartoons to draw the character as diminished and being very small when you want to put him down. Presidents tend to shrink as they go more years in office, but not all presidents. Trump got bigger and fatter, but boy, Jimmy Carter sure shrank.
Yeah, I think it was Jimmy Carter who was the first president that was depicted as being diminished. And it could have been Jeff McNally who did that. Since then, other people have picked it up too.
I do notice that editors shy away from Ukraine cartoons.
They do.
That's kind of disappointing.
I would have drawn many more cartoons on it after a year than I have. And maybe I've gone months and not touched on the war in Ukraine.
Them shying away from cartoons probably speaks to the editors thinking that the readers are not interested in cartoons, which is a shame.
We get the stats from our own site, and any cartoons about anything happening in a foreign country get very little traffic, even if it's a big important event in a foreign country. The readers just don't have interest in that.
Except when the Queen croaked, that got a lot of mileage. But other than that,
I just think that network news, news on television, big newspapers, they just don't have budget and staff to cover world events like they used to.
right.
And they become less of a priority. And then there's less demand from the editor. But if it's not always in the news prominently, then maybe even with a cartoonist, you're just focusing on other stuff when you really should be focusing on this huge story. Like a presidential trip to Ukraine. I did a Ukraine cartoon this week because the president was there, because Biden was there. So I just thought this should be covered a lot more than it has been by cartoonists throughout the year.
Well, if Kim Kardashian traveled over there for some reason, it would be covered. But because she, that's part of the reason too.
All right. This one's by Rick McKee. It's got a big inflation balloon, and newspapers just love these big balloon cartoons. The inflation balloon is lifting Uncle Sam up into the air, and he's tangled up in the cord, and Uncle Sam is thinking, "Where's a fighter jet when you need one?"
No soft landing if you get shot down. Anyway.
Here's one by Adam Ziglas. Uncle Sam's looking up in the air at balloons and thinking, "We need to do something about these objects in the sky." Well, at the same time, behind his back, unnoticed, is the crash of chemical train in Palestine, Ohio.
Yep. That's a classic, just sort of yoking two newspaper stories together. And those cartoons always click.
That's a standard for cartoonists. How can we put two things together? Draw a chart with arrows between them, which two things go together to come up with your cartoon in the morning. You guys do that?
When I'm desperate for an idea, maybe. It's one of the ways to search out a joke when you need to.
So here is Pat Burns, New Yorker cartoonist. He's got the man sitting in the chair looking at his cell phone, and the wife looks horrified. Man says, "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder myself if I truly have this much hate in my heart or if I'm just doing it for the likes." I think that's cute.
That's a great comment on social media.
Yeah.
Pat Burns is great. And here at number 10 is John Darko from Missouri. And he's got Jesus preaching at, looks like the Wailing Wall. In the crowd, someone's saying, "He seems too woke for me." It is really, really rare that any kind of cartoon that depicts Jesus gets reprinted by newspapers.
I know. I'm happy to see that.
It seems like a cartoon that Pat would have drawn as well, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think
I have collected I've drawn lots of Jesuses that
I don't think I've ever
reprinted
drawn
at all.
I've never drawn Muhammad. I've never drawn Buddha. I got to get off the ball here.
Well, I can't recommend that you do. I have collected the 5 most reprinted cartoons that each of you have done in your entire careers with cable cartoons, and I thought I'd show those to you.
Okay.
So, Pat, this is your most popular cartoon ever with editors. It
Wow.
shows a little family, and they're looking at a house that's up in the air that looks like an arrow pointing up with the word rent. The rent is going up, and it says, "A major cause of homelessness explained." And the kids say, "It's too high," with some good cartoon cussing. And the lady is trying to step on a step ladder of her wages. I'm guessing that this is a surprise that this is your most popular cartoon ever. In fact, it is 25% more popular than your second most popular cartoon. And it was reprinted in close to 250 papers, the most that we can ever get a cartoon to be reprinted in.
Wow.
This was
Wow.
just all out crazy hit that eclipsed everything else you've ever done.
That's surprising me, but I mean, the cartoon is accurate, right?
No,
Yeah.
it makes a
It's
wonderful
accurate.
point. It makes a wonderful point. And graphically, I think editors, and I thought the idea of using the arrow as the house and everything, I thought it was a good cartoon. So
Yeah,
I'm not surprised by that at
Yeah.
all. But
So the little kid who's swearing is to blank high. He's from that guy who ran president years ago.
right,
And his
the
whole
rent is
hit
too damn
thing
high.
was the rent is too damn high.
Right.
The rent is too damn high.
He was funny.
It does surprise me. Yes, that this would be the most popular one I've ever done. But apparently it was a good one. Many papers.
It is, but
print-
you do so many beautiful drawings, and your number 2 cartoon this week is just a fantastic, beautiful drawing.
Well, speaking
know-
of this cartoon, for example, I think what happens is when editors are logging in or when they're looking for something, you just happen to hit on that right image and that right issue at that very moment, then it blows up. And I think that's what happened. Nobody else had anything comparable to this. And they said, oh, this is great. We haven't commented on this. And so, it becomes very popular. So there is a bit of luck in the timing of it, I think.
It was crazy. All right, here's your number 2 cartoon.
Oh.
You've got a huge crowd of people of all colors, and it's got a big "We the People," and they're wearing T-shirts that say "Strike for climate, no justice, no peace. Black Lives Matter, global justice. I care. Do you equal pay? I can't breathe. Me too. Rainbow flag." It's just a very nice, patriotic, freedom of speech cartoon, and editors liked it. I like it.
I wonder if they would like it now, because I did this during the George Floyd protests, and I really felt like America was changing in a good way. There was going to be police reform. There was going to be addressing racism, the systemic abuse of minorities in this country. I thought that we were heading in a good direction.
Yeah.
But the blowback against that has been pretty ferocious. I don't know if you see it, but
Yeah. I don't think this cartoon did very well in the conservative markets for sure. For those
Yes, you
obvious
didn't
reasons.
include any T-shirts that say "Right to Repair" or "Keep the immigrants out."
Yeah.
no, I didn't.
Second Amendment. This
Uh,
is
How well did it go in Salt Lake when this appeared? How well did the reception go in Salt Lake?
The Salt Lake Tribune is taken by people who are generally more, I guess, liberal. And so the cartoon got a great response. I heard from people at the bookstore just down around the corner that they loved this cartoon. They thought it was great.
This is a showpiece of a cartoon. This
Well,
is a great one.
It's really hard to do a crowd scene with lots of faces and have it.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like it was done so quick and easy, but really have a lot going on. And when I look at this, I see something I never noticed about your work. It just looks like a Joel Pfeiffer cartoon from the 1960s.
Oh, he
You-
was one of my,
you-
he
yeah,
was one of my heroes.
yeah. I
Growing
can
up,
see
I
that.
loved his books. I loved his style.
Great. It's really nice.
Well, thank you.
Well, it's a beautiful cartoon, Pat. I would put this on your obituary, but not early.
Okay. Not too early.
Okay. This is your 3rd most popular cartoon, and you've got mailbox labeled as useful, a voting booth labeled as useful, and a guy labeled as useless who's saying, "Bruh, your vote don't matter."
Mhm.
Mail-in voting, in-person voting, useless. I think that's cute.
Well, thank you. One of the biggest frustrations I have with our elections is the people who just don't care. They don't vote. And they'll say stuff like, both parties are the same. What's the difference? Which drives me absolutely crazy because they are not the same. Yeah.
This is surely an election day cartoon, and also cartoons that are associated with holidays or events or anniversaries tend to far outperform other cartoons. So just the timing of this cartoon was a big boost to it. Okay, here's your number 5. You've got the graduate throwing up college cost on his hat and he's throwing in the air, and then he's looking up, and his hat is gone. He lost it. All that college cost went off into the ether. And I should say, too, that you reposted this cartoon, having posted it earlier. And this is just the stats from your reposted cartoon. But if you added them together, which I wasn't able to do, this might be your most popular cartoon.
Interesting.
I don't know about adding them together to get a lifetime number on it.
Well, but again, it's one of those cartoons that doesn't go Democrat or Republican.
Right.
Yes, and also it's kind of it's kind of tied to the event of graduation time, and
Yeah.
they really do scarf up the graduation cartoons at that time.
Yeah.
Right. And graduations happen over maybe 6 weeks. It's not like it's all tied to 1 week of the year. So you could run that cartoon anytime in May or June.
Right.
Appropriate.
Editors
Well,
are
we
hungry
get
for that
6
stuff,
weeks
just like
of
holiday cartoons.
we get
They-
6
Mhm.
weeks of Christmas cartoons
Yeah.
and 6 weeks of it's too hot in the summer cartoons. Some events last for a while.
You
Good point.
have graduation, then you have back to school, then you have summer vacation cartoons, and editors love that stuff.
And still, even though all these events are great and really boost usage on the cartoonists submit the cartoons too late to be printed for the events. And we get all kinds of complaints from editors about that. It's very frustrating to us. We can't get the cartoonists to comply, but that's just our problem here. All right, Pat, this is your last one. And I guess that makes it number 5. And you've got the huge sun that's global warming. And the lady is trying to explain to the Trumpy in a red MAGA hat what's going on, which is very obvious in the big global warming lettering. And he says, I just don't see it.
Yeah.
That's a great cartoon. From a technical standpoint, are you guys using a pencil, or you guys get that sort of organic feel, which is so appealing?
There's beautiful texture throughout this
Yeah,
cartoon.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So I use an iPad with a pen, and the app is Procreate. It's got all kinds of brushes and all kinds of textures, and you can achieve a lot of different looks by changing pins and trying different things. Seems like I did something just a couple days ago where, because I was using Procreate, I could go back and I can't remember what it was, but it was an effect that I could do with Procreate that I otherwise could not do with an pented pencil. But it's the Procreate pencil, so it looks like the real
Right.
thing.
No, it's a great
Well-
effect. Great effect. Very,
Lovely.
very organic and great.
So thank
All
you.
right, RJ, this is your most popular cartoon you've ever drawn for us. You've been with us quite a few years. This is Biden on the set of The Price is Right, looking very much like Bob Barker. And you've got Democrats labeled progressives, moderates, and blue dogs with their guesses on how much it costs 3.5 trillion, 2.5 trillion, 1 trillion. And the Republican looking glum, and he's guessed 1. This is a pox on
So
both your houses
smart
cartoon.
bet.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, what?
I'm what the low bid is always a smart bid, isn't it? On the Price is Right. The reason I'm surprised is because often when I sketch ideas, I have 2 or 3 that I absolutely fall in love with, and often I just throw in another idea or 2 just to fill out what I'm submitting to my editors. And this is one of those that was just thought of at the last second, and I really didn't think anybody would pick it. I didn't think my editors would go for it. They loved it, and so I probably fine-tuned it from the sketch stage to this in terms of the elements that are in it. But, so it just surprised me. You never know where an idea that will click with people will come from, and it wouldn't have been one, at the sketch stage, I would have picked to be a really good cartoon, a popular cartoon.
Well, it surprised
I'm very
me because
surprised.
it's got donkeys and elephants in it, and it's got Biden in it. And usually you put a president in a cartoon, and that just kills it.
Hmm.
But,
Mhm.
Price is Right
Mhm.
is like middle America. It's Americana, and you don't see Price is Right cartoons. And I'll bet the editors just thought, I know my readers. They all watch The Price is Right. They got to have this cartoon.
Mhm. Yeah. Actually, I think I've done 2 other Price is Right cartoons in the last 2 or 3 years, so maybe I'm on something. Got a little neat.
I think
All
so.
at myself.
All right, here's your number 2 cartoon. And this was another one that surprised me because this is bashing the Democrats a bit more than the Republicans. And you've got the Democrat showing his presentation. It says 2022 midterm elections focus group. And he says, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And all the voters in the audience are saying inflation, war with Putin, rising crime, a nuclear exchange, illegal immigration, more COVID. Editors like these cartoons that are a list of all the things that are troubling people, particularly at the New Year's cartoons when everybody's so happy to get rid of the last year, and every year can have the same kind of cartoons about the list of everything that's terrible. This is a list of everything that's terrible cartoon. And those are popular.
Duly noted. I'll do more of them. I'm just wary of the idea of drawing cartoons to be popular because it's kind of going down the road that Fox News went down. Trying to cater to your audience instead of just doing what you think is important.
Well, I should
But,
say that the vast majority of our cartoons, we've got 60 cartoonists. We get about 130 cartoons a week. And the top 5 of the top 10 every week probably are reprinted so much more than the bottom 5 and all the other 120 cartoons of the week that it's probably equal, the top 5 and the other 125 cartoons.
fascinating.
And we really need to have some cartoons that editors want in order to have a viable
Mhm.
thing that editors want to subscribe to. Because the cartoons that cartoonists want to draw, that 120 out of 130, that is not
Mhm.
at all what the customer wants. And cartoonists
Right.
tend to pay very little attention to the demand side of the equation, which I don't mind because I'm not really fond of what editors want. But at the same time, we have to have a viable product to make it work. Now, in both your cases, you
Right.
guys draw lots and lots of strong cartoons. And really, everybody draws some cartoons that editors would like, but also the strong cartoons that they want that the editors don't ever print.
To Daryl's
Yeah.
point, the major pushback we've had was right after Trump was elected in that first
Mhm.
spring, 17. And about halfway through the spring, we started getting numerous complaints from editors saying, do you guys have any cartoons that aren't Trump bashing cartoons? And I said, well, Trump's a character, and even our conservative guys are taking swings at him. And they just said, well, the readers are sick of it. And we got a lot of pushback on that in terms of what the cartoonists felt they wanted to draw versus what the editors wanted to
Mhm.
run. And of course, that cooled off, and the editors were sympathetic to what was happening. They just said, listen, we need anything that doesn't have Trump in it. We'll take anything. Everything has Trump in it right
Right.
now. And so what we did is on our login page, we put up the Trump friendly section, just so any cartoon about holiday or anything like that had nothing to do with Trump. Those became popular during that period of time. But that was definitely a period where the cartoonists wanted to draw, and it was their responsibility to do that. But so it was a little bit of a trying period.
Daryl, you should mention that on your website, you put the most popular cartoons on the right-hand side of the screen, right?
Keep in mind that that is a site that's only for editors, that the readers go to the caglecast site where we don't call that out.
Right.
But for editors, we
I
were
didn't know
finding
that.
editors complaining that there were no conservative cartoons because they're bothered by cartoons that they disagree with more than they're reassured by the cartoons that reinforce their pre-existing worldview. And so we put up a conservative section at the top just to stop those complaints so that they
Right.
would see that there are conservative cartoons. And what we found was the conservative editors really don't print the conservative cartoons more than the liberal editors. They both print the same cartoons, which are the ones that are not taking any point of view. So that is really just to deal with the complaints. And the popular section is to deal with the editors who complain that all the cartoons are terrible. And, there's a lot of editors that complain about that. I realized that by culling out the cartoons that are popular, we are making them even more popular, which creates more of a distance between the popular ones and the less popular ones.
Well, I should
It's popular
clarify. I
with
should clarify the
editors.
point of what Daryl said. When they complain and say they're terrible, they don't mean they're terribly drawn. They think they're wonderfully drawn. It's just they're terrible and they don't particularly agree with the message. Well, we have editors complaining about other syndicates, which we won't name, that are competitors who they think are terrible because the art is bad. That doesn't happen with us. They really appreciate the standard of work that most of our guys do. It's just that when they disagree, it's over the tone or the subject of the cartoon, which is, to be expected.
This is one reason I think on these podcasts, I want to get away from just doing the popular cartoons.
There's a simple solution. They could just hire a cartoonist to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that kind of raises the question of since there's so few papers that have a cartoonist, do the syndicated cartoonists have a responsibility to provide the material for all these newspapers that don't hire their own, create stuff that with that broad appeal? Because if you're at a big daily newspaper, if you're doing your job right, in my opinion, you may be drawing 5 or 6 cartoons a week, and at least 3 of them should be on local issues. And then you need to do some national stuff and the local stuff for your own audience. But you're also tailoring your cartoons to your own editorial page's point of view. And if you're in that kind of situation, if you're drawing cartoons with broad appeal, there's definitely a need for it. I see that.
No, I think a
So,
cartoonist has to be true to his own conscience and what he wants to draw or
Mhm.
she wants to draw. We don't tell anybody what to draw.
So,
We just have the data from the feedback of years of editors bitching and moaning, and this is what they bitch and
yeah,
moan
so,
about.
at any paper I'm at, I don't want to be a jerk. I generally like my community, and I want to draw cartoons that people in the community will like. I don't want to always be gadfly picking at, pointing out flaws and or challenging people to change their beliefs. I genuinely like drawing a cartoon that everybody loves, and it's just a feel good cartoon.
A cartoonist has to be in tune with his own audience. Pat's
Yeah.
probably better at that than anybody around. Is he's so in tune with the people of Utah, and I think that's why he's still around. Is because
And I've been here a
Yeah.
long time.
So,
Yeah, Pat's been
I know
employed
the
longer
audience.
than any other cartoonist that has a job now. There
Pat
are
does
very
some
few
great
cartoonists
cartoons
who have
about
jobs now.
yeah, he does great cartoons about the state of Utah and the politics and the social aspect of it, probably better than anybody because he's so in tune with that. And I think that speaks to why it's so important to have a cartoonist on staff is because after so much time, they know the readers better than anybody. And I think to RJ's point, that's why it's so important to hire cartoonists is to have that voice, and the readers can open up the paper or read it online, and they can relate to it because they said this is familiar. I get the references, I get
right.
whatever else it is, and I think when you do purely syndicated material, you lose that.
Well, I should add that about 50 years ago in the 70s, there were a little more than 2,000 newspapers, and there were about 150 cartoonists who had staff jobs. And, that is still 7% of
Yeah.
papers that had staff
Shocking.
Yeah,
jobs.
even if it's
There
peak, it
have
was very
never
low.
been a large percentage of papers that
Right.
had staff jobs. And ever since syndication, almost everybody who saw editorial cartoons and most of the content on the editorial page were seeing syndicated content.
Right.
So, although for us it's a calamity that all of these cartoonist jobs are gone,
Mhm.
150 down to maybe less than 20 now, that's not a big percentage change since it was uh, ever. It's
Mhm.
always been mostly syndicated cartoons.
Right.
When I was in St. Louis, the Post-Dispatch is a traditionally liberal paper, and the St. Louis Globe Democrat, I think it was called, was the conservative paper where Pat Buchanan was the editorial page editor. But that was closed about 20 years before I got there. But everyone in the community remembered it, all the conservatives. And so they were always policing the editorial page of the Post-Dispatch to make sure that we were out even-handed and always writing me. But when I was laid off after they went through bankruptcy, I took great solace in the letters I got from conservatives bemoaning the fact that they weren't going to see all the great local cartoons, right? Because they wanted the local issues in their city covered, and they liked seeing it reflected back in a cartoon.
Right.
They liked seeing drawings that had St. Louis landmarks in them, and neighborhoods they recognized as background. It's just a great way for a newspaper to build community, and it's
Well, and it's the local cartoons that have the most impact. If I do a cartoon about
yeah.
Joe Biden, it's just another pebble in a landslide. But if I do a cartoon about cutting taxes for rich people in Salt Lake City, that gets noticed.
right, exactly.
So, RJ, this is your next most popular cartoon.
Nice.
Operation Warp Speed Ahead. You've got the
Mhm.
Starship Enterprise with 2 vaccine needles on it labeled COVID-19 vaccines, and it's warp speeding to an arm near you. This doesn't surprise me because it's got Star Trek in it. All right. And the Polarized Express. This is your last popular cartoon. The Coronavirus Relief Edition. You've got a train in front of the Capitol labeled Congress, and the Democrat and Republican engines are pulling the train in opposite directions so that it's going nowhere. The coronavirus relief is going nowhere. It's a pox on both your houses cartoons. And it's a
Exactly.
beautiful cartoon.
Thank you. I could probably publish a book over the past 20 or 30 years of gridlock, Washington is stuck, nothing gets done cartoon. It's a staple, and especially drawing for, the Congress, the newspaper of Congress, one of my audiences.
Hey, we have reached the end of our cartoons, gentlemen.
Good to see you all.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks,
Good to see
Daryl.
you guys.
Hey, thanks for joining us. That's it. Remember to subscribe. Visit the caglecast.com site for all of our podcasts. Visit cagle.com to see all the cartoons by all the best cartoonists, including Pat and RJ. And I'll see you next time with another exciting episode about editorial cartoons. drawn by artificial intelligence with our brilliant cartoonist Rick McKee, who did the first syndicated drawn by artificial intelligence cartoon that we will be discussing as a threat to our lives and livelihood. Gentlemen, I will see you later. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
guys.
bye.